Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is a re-recording of a lecture I gave at the 8th International Conference on Islamic Finance at Hamad bin Khalifa University with the theme of Islamic Finance in a Divided World. In this re-recording, I expand the remarks that were made very briefly due to limitation of time in the original conference. Islamic economics was born with a revolutionary spirit after the Second World War diminished the power of the European colonizers. Revolutions succeeded all around the Islamic world, and there was the hope that we would be able to replace capitalist economic systems with Islamic ones, which would offer justice, equity, and welfare for the masses. However, revolutionary efforts did not succeed, and the capitalists remained firmly in power with the support of the former colonizers. So, around the mid 1970s, the realization came that revolution is not coming. That led to the second generation of Islamic economists who said, okay, let's be pragmatic, let's work with the existing capitalist system and try to modify it to be Islamic. So the goal was to adapt capitalism to Islam, or alternatively, to adapt Islam to capitalism. In 2007-8, the global financial crisis and many other crises associated with capitalism became very clear in the public mind. So the third generation was born, which wanted to go back to the revolutionary ideals of the first generation, but also recognizing that revolution from above is impossible, said that let's work within what we can do, and that is to work with the communities, the local masjid-based communities, where one can create an Islamic local community, maybe local currencies, and link these social units around the globe to create unity in the Ummah. Most papers presented at the conference are of the second generation type. We take the existing structure of capitalist theory and institution as given and try to make minor tweaks, changes to bring them closer to Islamic ideals. I'm going to argue in this talk that we need a third generation approach. We need to think about the big picture and make radical changes. And the best example to illustrate what I'm saying comes from a saying of Milton Friedman. And he said that in moments of crisis, it is the ideas that guide the change. So when a crisis occurs, there's confusion, nobody knows what's happening, nobody knows what to do. So if you're in there first with an analysis, a diagnosis, and a prescription, your ideas are likely to get adopted and create change. And illustration of this is the great change in thinking that I myself saw when I was studying economics in graduate school in Stanford in the 1970s. Keynesian economics was the dominant paradigm, and people in Chicago school were considered the crackpots and ideologues. But in the 70s, when the oil crisis took place and stagflation took place, that was against Keynesian theory, Chicago school was ready for this crisis, and they explained why Keynesian theory was wrong and why free market economics could provide a solution to the economic crisis. And this became widely accepted and adopted. Reagan Thatcher revolution put it into practice, while in the universities, through various means, Keynesians were driven out, and Chicago school became the dominant paradigm. So this was a tremendous change in both the ways of thinking, the ideology, and also the practice. Today we face a monetary crisis. This monetary crisis is actually at the root of the social and the climate crisis that are also currently important. And because of this crisis, we need to think big, like the first generation revolutionaries of Islamic economics. If we can present our ideas in this moment of crises, in a diagnosis, a prescription, and a clear solution in a convincing way, we can create major change, just like the change that occurred from when Keynesian economics was replaced by monetary economics. For decades, the US has been the global power mainly because of the monetary power that it exercises. Now, this monetary power is being challenged mainly by China, but also by many other phenomena. And so, new monetary systems are being proposed, tried, and tested. And we need to be in this discussion and debate if we want to have a part in the emerging structure. Otherwise, we'll be left behind, we'll be part of the project of somebody else's. So, the key question that we want to think about is what is the direction, future direction that should be taken by Islamic finance around the globe? So, when we study social change, how do we change? How do we go from one place to another place? Then there are three dimensions that you need to think about. One is the positive, where do we stand? The other is the normative, where do we want to go? And the third is the transformative, how do we get from here to there? So now the positive part, the description of the actual reality, is where you have data and empirics and data analysis. This tells you where you stand. So this is where Western economics is very good. They are good at data analysis and empirical observations. They do not have any idea about what is the ideal state, and that is where Islamic economics comes in. Islamic economics has an idea of what the ideal state is, and this ideal state has been described and delineated by many Islamic economists. We have a fairly clear idea of what we want to achieve. Then there is the third step, which is the transformative step. How do we get from here to there? This is where there is a lot of unclarity, weakness, misunderstanding, confusion. The problem is that nobody has a good theory of social change. How do we change? How do we change a society? Now, Western social science is methodologically handicapped. They think that human societies evolve according to laws, just like the laws of physics govern how our planets will move. So they can't think of guiding this change because, according to them, the society has a natural pattern along which it will evolve no matter what we do. Islam has a strong normative component. It has a very good description of what should the world should be like. But as Islamic economists, we have failed to understand the process by which we can get from where we stand to where we need to go. It's useful to give an explanation of this. Suppose we think that we want to get to Hajj, so that's the goal. So the Sharia gives us very excellent instructions on what to do once we have crossed the boundaries and uh, when do we put on ihram and how do we make talbi and how many tawaf and how to do the sa'i and what to do with zamzam and so on and so forth. So there's a very detailed description of what to do. But for the transformation, how do we get from here to there? There is information needed that is not covered in the Sharia. So if somebody is living in Karachi, the first step for him to do would be to go to the nearest bank and to fill out the application form for Hajj and to put in the deposit that is required. And these are the first steps. Without these, he will not be able to get to Hajj. But these steps that he needs to take are local, contextual, temporal. So this is true today in Karachi. The same process would be very different if you are in Jakarta, and the same process would be very different if you are in Romania. So taking the steps, the first steps of transformation, those are always local and contextual, and they are never given by the Sharia. The Sharia tells you where you need to go, but it leaves us the task of thinking about how do we get there. This is not going to be the Quran won't tell you. The Hajj is first, but the Quran won't tell you, and the Hadith won't tell you, and the Fiqh won't tell you that you need to go to the nearest bank and fill out an application. This is what I think is the biggest failing today, that we have people who are ready to tell us that this is what Islamic finance should be doing, this is what Pakistan should be doing, this is what the Muslim world should be doing, this is what the Ummah should be doing. But they have a clear idea of an ideal picture, and there are also people who have a clear idea of where we stand. He say, oh, there we are in a hopeless position, and there is so much bad going on, and things are terrible, and Israel is killing, genociding, and we are all helpless, and so on. So they have a good description of the current reality, and we have a good description of where do we want to go, but nobody has any idea how do we get from here to there. And so the problem is that people think of the ideal stage and they think how far we are, and then they give up. Actually, the social change always begins by a sequence of small steps. So what we need to do is we need to think about what is the first step that will get us one step closer to the goal. Now, if you're standing in a given place, there are 360 different directions. So only one of these directions will get you closer to the goal. So knowing the goal is very important. It sets the direction, but knowing the goal doesn't tell you what the next step is. If you're standing in front of a mountain, then the next step will take you up. If you're standing in the front of the river, then you have to build a boat. And these are not things that the goal will tell you. So this is the issue which I think that we have generally failed to think clearly about: how to create social change one step at a time. To understand what we need to do today, we need to look at the history of the battle for the control of money. And one of the critical lessons from this history, which is very surprising, is that it is very much about knowledge. Knowing the nature of money is critical to understanding how to control it. In particular, what is taught in textbooks, that money is a unit of account, a medium of exchange, store of value, standard of deferred payment. All of these things are true but irrelevant. These are distractions. The essential uh, element, essential truth about money is that money is power. And so, unless we understand the critical nature of the relationship between money and power, we cannot set the direction for Islamic finance, what it should be trying to do, which will be of value and benefit to the Ummah. This is discussed in greater detail in my paper, which is linked on this page. The story of money is too complex to be recounted in this talk, but Glenn Davies' book, A History of Money from Ancient Times, is very good. But very, very briefly, the great transformation in Europe took place due to the Industrial Revolution, which led to the massive creation of surplus, things far beyond what was needed. So these things which were unnecessary were sold for money, and that money creates power. So one sells unnecessary goods to acquire power. And the critical distinction between a monetary economy and a traditional economy is that money itself is the goal. In traditional economies, money is the means to an end. You use it to buy things that you want. But in a monetary economy, you sell excess product and get money, and this money gives you power. Now, because power has constantly been changing hands. There has been a battle for power over the centuries. Different groups have risen to power and have fallen from power. And so money has always been associated with these power conflicts and with this biggest of conflicts, which is war. In this brief talk, it will be impossible to cover the close connection between money and war and power across the centuries. But just a few key events. The Bank of England was created in 1690s sometime to fund, to provide funds to England for their war against France, and this was enormously successful. The money lent about 12 million pounds to the King of England, built the English navy, which allowed the defeat of France. So, and how was this done? This was done by creating fiat money via the fractional reserve system. So fake money was created with no backing. It was promised to be backed by gold, but there was not enough gold. And then, basically, for a century or so, England had global hegemony. And this global hegemony was closely linked to the dominance of the British pound, which was backed by gold at a fixed exchange rate. And this was called the gold standard. Then World War I depleted Britain's gold and forced them off the gold standard. And then basically UK waged a monetary war against USA waged a monetary war against the UK to try to acquire the power for itself, and it succeeded in doing so in the Bretton Woods Agreement, which made dollar the primary currency of the globe. Michael Hudson's book gives a account of how basically US hegemony, unlike all previous imperialists, has been built on dollar supremacy. It's a financial control of the world. Uh, so the finding is interesting that US exports and imports are roughly balanced. But US runs a huge trade deficit. That is, the money it spends is much larger than the money it earns from imports, from exports. And what is that? Where does this extra money go if it's not used to buy goods from the rest of the world? It goes to US military expenditure. So basically, US military power is one-to-one correlated with the US monetary power. The ability of US to print dollars is equal to the ability of US to finance wars around the globe, and is equal to the power of the US hegemony. And now this is the problem that faces us today, that this hegemony is now slipping. China has emerged as a strong competitor, and there are many other countries which have combined enough power, enough weight to uh, end the dollar domination. So many schemes are emerging. And as I said, in the moments of crisis, new ideas come up and they shape the future. At the moment, the Islamic bloc is conspicuously absent. Once the new regime crystallizes, this opportunity for change will be lost. So, this is the time to speak up, to bring in new ideas, and to formulate a new way of a monetary system which will unite the Islamic bloc, give us power. If we fail to do so, then the emerging new setup of power will marginalize us. And once a new system is in place, it becomes extremely hard to change it. So, in light of these ideas, the central question for this talk is, can Islamic finance lead the way towards a new global monetary architecture? Less ambitiously, can we carve out a place for ourselves, Islamic bloc, just like the European Union created a place for itself within the US dollar hegemony? So, can the Islamic bloc create a place for ourselves within a global financial architecture where we have some room to manipulate, some limited amount of freedom? So today, unless we do so, we will be trapped within the global financial system. Today, less than 10 people own more than uh, the entire wealth of the bottom 50% of the planet, and their money is the source of their power. So, if we are thinking about change, then I said there are three things to look at. One is the positive description of what is the role of Islamic finance. And so we can see quite clearly, without any ambiguity and controversy, that Islamic finance today serves two sets of power configurations. One is the global financial capital, and the other is the local financial elites. So, in some sense, it is playing a positive role. Islamic finance gives a certain amount of strength to the Islamic countries on the global financial stage, which they wouldn't have otherwise. But at the same time, this strength is at the disposal of the financial elites, the small number of wealthy people within the Islamic countries, and it does not serve the masses. It doesn't serve the people. So, in positive terms, Islamic finance is serving the Islamic bloc, but it's only serving the financial elites, not the masses. So, the question is, how can we create change? How can we change things for the better? So, as I've said, social change requires taking a sequence of small steps towards the goal. But there is one more element that I haven't discussed, and that is that when we are playing this game, there are power configurations. There are people. When we take one step towards the goal, there will be opposing forces, people who will be trying to prevent that change. So it is like a game of chess. You make a move, and then the opponent makes a move. And if you fail to come, if you just say that, okay, I'm going to take step X and Y, and you just map out a path without thinking about the opposition you will face, you will almost surely fail. So the internationally monetary architecture, which has dollar domination today, was designed by Harry Dexter at the Bretton Woods conference, and he prevailed over the proposal of Keynes, which was much better, much more symmetric, much more balanced. He prevailed because he had the power to do so, but also he had the idea of what needed to be done. So it's very important to understand the nature of the change we want to make, and that this will require strategy. So the strategy means that we can't just spell out, okay, here is what we want the IFIs to be doing. The Islamic financial students should be giving qarz hasana to the poor people to make their lives easy, and so on and so forth. We can create a wish list of things that we want Islamic finance to do, but this will not be of much use because it doesn't tell us what we need to do to get there. So the question that we have in front of us is that can IFIs play a role in reshaping global financial architecture? This involves thinking about what are the steps that we can take which will be aligned with the current power configuration, things which we can do, which are feasible to do, where there will be opposition, but we can manage the opposition and not think about things which are currently impossible, though it is possible that after we take a few steps in the right direction, they will become possible. So, to decide which direction we should step in, we have to focus on the goal. What should the goal of Islamic finance be? Well, there is a very clear indication that public resources should be used for public benefit as a principle of the Sharia. And money is a public resource. It is of a zero cost, minimal printing cost. So almost zero cost, this good is produced and it's of great value. So the benefit that is derived from this good should go for the welfare of the masses. But currently, this doesn't happen. Money is created, but it's created by banks. It's created for free. It's created costlessly, but it serves only the wealthy. So instead of capitalist finance, which maximizes the profits of the wealthy in this world, Islamic finance should be working on maximizing the profits in the akhirah, which means providing the greatest service to the masses in the Islamic world. And so this would involve moving from Sharia compliance to adopting the Sharia in the form and in the spirit. So, exactly what is the change needed? That is something that I have discussed in other papers. Basically, since we uh, eschew the top down approach, we don't want to make revolutions. So, we plan on a bottom up approach. So, we need Islamic finance to be strengthening Islamic communities around the globe. But how can we do that when doing so is not aligned with the needs of global capitalism? It's not aligned with the local financial powers. So we can do this by uh, explaining things to the masses. The Islamic label is designed to appeal to the masses, and it is also certified and authenticated by Islamic by Sharia scholars. So while a few of the Sharia scholars have been co-opted by the system, and a lot of them, the vast majority, are sincere and are ideologically on board with the Islamic ideals. And so they can be brought, if we develop consensus, they can be brought to bring pressure on the Islamic financial institutions to make one of two choices. Either they should serve the public or they should drop the label Islamic. They are welcome to do whatever they want, but if they want to call themselves Islamic, then they have to serve, then they have to satisfy Islamic ideals. So this kind of pressure can be created, and we don't want, radical and revolutionary change in one step. In one step, what we would like to ask for is double or triple bottom line. Double bottom line for banks, for Islamic financial institutions, should be a requirement for the label Islamic. That is, instead of just looking at money, how much profit they are making, we should look at how much harm they are causing to the public as a negative, and how much benefits they are bringing to the public. And the third bottom line is the climate change aspect. So these aspects, uh, we must create public pressure and demand from both the masses and also the ulama that the Islamic label requires banks to keep double or triple bottom line, which means that they have to keep track of their public service, and they have to use social accounting measures to present this to the public. We don't demand any performance for them, but we demand that they display what they are doing for the public. So this will create pressure on banks to start making change. So this could be a good first step, a place to begin the process of change. When we try to create this change, we will anticipate pushback. There are going to be many people who are going to oppose this. So what we can do is there are small Islamic banks serving local communities, and we can start with those. We don't need to start at the top, and we can start making changes, and we can build successful examples. And basically, we need to empower communities, and more details are given in this paper, which is listed on this page. But remember that we don't have a policy. We don't have that, okay, first we will do X, then we'll do Y. Actually, this is a power game. So we will make some moves and we will anticipate pushback, and things will depend on local context. What is the alignment of powers? What are the capabilities that are in the hands? And this will vary from place to place. The strategy for people in Karachi or in some community in Karachi will be different from that in Istanbul, and different from rural areas, and different in cities, and so on. So while there will be some general principles, specific ways of further strategy will require local thought. And this is how it works. The social change from bottom up is heterogeneous, fragmented, and it needs to be put together. And I have discussed some aspects of this in this paper that is linked on this page. So I have many essays on this topic of monetary change, and these are all listed and linked together in this essay of mine, which is linked on this page. Also, these slides can be downloaded from the link given on this slide. So Rajab Shenturk asked me for an idea for what we should do in the ninth international conference next year. So what I propose in the light of this discussion is that we should ask for research on reshaping the international monetary architecture. One problem with this proposal is that our students are not trained to think in these terms. Students are trained in conventional positive micro, macro, and conventional Islamic economics, which is very much second generation. So they learn how to do data analysis. They learn how to think within the capitalist system. If you want to change the system, then this kind of analysis, this kind of technique, this kind of training is not enough for people to do empirical and qualitative and historical research. See, if you're trying to make a paradigm change, you're trying to build a new system, then data analysis will not do because the data describes what was in the past, but you want to change the system, then the data is not going to be very helpful at all. So how can we do a historical and quantitative, qualitative approach, which used to be the main form in which economics was done and still can be done, and I think is still the superior way of doing economics? Well, I have listed on this slide 5 books, all of which describe the historical and qualitative background which you need to understand the monetary system and how it came into existence. And this understanding is required if we want to consider how this system can be changed. So, even though students are not trained to think like this, these 5 books, if you read them, they will give you the background needed to think along these lines, to do research along these lines, and to write along these lines. So that is the last slide. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun al mursaleen alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. May Allah Ta'ala guide us in the paths towards His light and save us and protect us from the darkness.